Well. Welcome back to the Doormat Mom No More podcast, where we talk about estrangement, family estrangement, and the ins and outs and all the complexities of it. Um, well, interesting development. Since the Beckhams had this situation with Brooklyn Beckham go down, where he announced their estrangement and shared a little bit about those details of his life with um, Victoria and David Beckham. I got dragged into an article put out by The Guardian about the family and about their estrangement. And from the moment I did, my Facebook group, the Doormat Mom No More Facebook group, started exploding with new requests from the UK to join. So I know I always say that this is not a national epidemic. This has global tentacles, and that has shown itself to be true once again through the Beckhams. I always talk about estrangement as being not having any type of boundaries or borders, whether it be cultural, economic, religious, what have you, geographic. It hops all boundaries and borders, and that's why it's so worrisome. Because why fix a world if there are no cohesive families in it to enjoy, the world. So I want to share with you a little bit. Well, I want to share a video first about a gentleman, a doctor, who I found on TikTok. Like me, he hit the ground running, speaking up in a very different way than many of the therapists and the mental health professionals are speaking about estrangement. And when I heard him, discuss what he was discussing, I found like, wow, finally a breath of fresh air, someone that stands out and actually, discusses the other side of all this. So I'm gonna share a video. His name is Dr. Peter Anderson. He's right up the road from me, which I was so surprised. And he's in Massachusetts. Anderson Family Therapy. He's so overwhelmed with clients. He does not take clients himself anymore, but that tells you the impact that he's having. And let me share this one video now, and then we'll bring him on and we can talk a little bit to him. So here we go. Stage here.
So this is the main reason why you actually don't cut off your parents. You ready to hear for it? When you do, you cut off your story. Who are you? Your new self? What is that supposed to mean? What do you mean your new self? New self without a story? Friedrich Nietzsche actually was asked about the eternal recurrence, and I love this answer. He said, people who are the most healthy, when asked the question, would you live your life over and over again? And with all the pain, with all the hurt, would you keep doing it over and over and over again? And you realize that the people who are the least healthy, the people that were always complaining, the people that were always the most bitter, would say, no, I would change this. I would change this. I would change this. The people who are the healthiest, though, this is Nietzsche's point, actually say, I would have all the hurt. I would have all the pain. Because how would I be who I am right now if I cut out everybody from my life that I somehow had disagreements about or disagreements with? When you cut people off, you kill your story. When you kill your story, you have no ability to forgive. When you have no ability to forgive, this is what happens to you. You become bitter inside. You fail to see how your bitterness has pushed so many people away that any type of constructive feedback is immediately seen as traumatizing to you. You become an inward shell of who you really could have become if you actually maintain the story of how you became who you are. Because if you're ashamed for who you are in this moment, you think cutoff is going to somehow alleviate that pain. It's not going to. So, therapists who will not be at your funeral, who are telling you to cut off your parents, because those therapists will not be at your funeral. They don't understand that your story is an essential component, not only your mental health, but also about who you are as a person. So the best thing that you can possibly do is not to cut those people off, but to learn how to evaluate or to supersede the previous story so you can have a better one. And that takes courage, and that takes insight. That's the road to happiness. It's also the road to freedom, because then nobody intimidates you. So what's your path? The cowardly one cuts everybody off. Now you don't have a story, so everybody can praise you for 5 seconds. Or the courageous path. What do you want to do? You choose. It's up to you.
How many great things are said in that video, right? Your story, we all have a story, right? And I agree that story is so valuable, not only to, understanding who you are and who you're going to become, but the trickle over effect into, future generations. That story is a critical. And like he says it like it is. And that's one of the reasons I really, really found him to be so refreshing. So I'm going to bring him on and we're going to talk about his story. Hi.
Hi, Laura. Good to see you. Hey. Yeah.
How are you?
I'm okay. Yes, doing really well. Doing
All
really,
right.
really well. I should preface, I'm not a doctor yet. I do have 3 master's degrees, but I don't
Okay.
have a doctor. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No, it's actually, that's a different road. I was headed that way, but then I do teach 8 classes at Endicott. So I'm like, why get a doctorate? I'm already teaching 8 classes anyway. So anyway,
Yeah.
so.
You know what? It's probably smarter not to go to medical school.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Well, yeah. Right. So I know that was really, I was looking at doctoral work to teach. And then now that I got my own private practice and the company's growing, I'm like, and I'm already teaching. I'm like, well, I don't have to. So
Makes
anyway,
sense.
yeah. So it makes more sense just to do what I
So
keep doing.
I think, yeah, you know what? I really think that we get caught up. I'm glad you brought that up, even so, because I really think we get caught up today in
Mm.
all of the titles and all of the letters after someone's name anyway, which doesn't
Sure.
mean that they're not valuable, but I think they
Yeah.
get mistaken as absolute fact, absolute, godlike, all right, information. And
Yeah.
I think that overwhelms people into forgetting that common sense really does reign. And
Mm.
sometimes when you're in a room of many with letters and you're sitting there by yourself and you're like, okay, and you don't have those letters behind you, that doesn't mean that you don't have value to add. And sometimes, and many times, I believe that common sense perspective is exactly what's needed in a room full of very highly learned folks,
Mm.
right? So I
Yeah.
think that we bring that to the table too. So don't get overwhelmed with letters and out there.
So 100%.
So tell us a little bit about your background and tell us how you arrived to this side of the conversation, the estrangement conversation. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll try to do the long, but I'll keep it short. I'll try to do it like I'm doing one of my hospital evaluations where the doctor does want me to not go too long, but just enough information. So, I mean, I was, so I did grow up in an abusive home. My father now acknowledges that he's got dementia now, but he's doing really well, and I reconciled with my father much later when I was around 21. I found faith, and that's what helped me reconcile with my father. And even though my dad at the time was not an easy man, I felt the need to forgive him. My mother was my safe person. She was my secure attached bond. I guess you could say that. But, I found so much joy in forgiving him and loving him and learning about his own past. I could have easily cut him out, and I probably would have had some justification and in doing so. But I probably would have carried some of his own demons with my own family, if I'm being honest with you. And forgiving him and reconciling and and really moving on from that experience taught me a lot. So that was my own personal story, but I didn't really deal with all this stuff that we're dealing with now till much later. As a clinician, I got into so I first went to school and I got my master's of divinity. I thought I was going to be doing some type of ministry, but I realized that's not what I was called to. I then stayed on at the same seminary and got a marriage and family therapy degree, and then moved up here in Massachusetts in 2011. So I saw a lot of families inside their homes, and at that time I was also getting a THM and something
Right.
else. But anyway, so I was very enmeshed inside, or yeah, involved in tons of family work. And at that time, I would, try to bring a lot of families together. I would do a lot of family counseling. I didn't see at that time like cutoff. It wasn't very much like a popular thing. Even with the parents who were very, very problematic, and I've worked with those parents. I've worked with the kids of those parents. I've
Right.
seen some serious abuse. I mean, man, I've seen some real neglect, and I've walked with a lot of my clients through that, like how to maneuver some of those boundaries. But around I would say about 7 years ago, I started seeing this new phenomenon with parents that I had worked with for 10 years,
Right.
who I knew these parents.
Right.
They were good parents. Like they were, man, they put a lot of energy in their kids. Were they perfect? No, but they were great parents. And
Right.
it wasn't just one or two families, it was multiple, where they would come back to me in grief and saying, "What did I do wrong?" And I would hear their story and I'm like, "Gosh, I'm not sure why your son cut you off. I'm not sure why your daughter cut you off." And at the time, if you had talked to me about 6 years ago, I would have probably said, well, maybe there's some undiagnosed trauma, maybe there's some kind of like, memory that really is holding them back. And then it wasn't until about 2 years ago I got certified in personality disorders, and I met with some of these same families, and I saw a lot of the same patterns:
Mm.
narcissism, borderline, histrionic, paranoid, and that would play this drama triangle with these quote good parents.
Mm.
And these good parents would come in my office seeking an answer, like really wanting to apologize for something.
Yeah.
And it wasn't working. It wouldn't matter how much apologies they would give these kids would constantly up the ante to one
Right.
more thing and then one more thing. And it was very, I started realizing, okay, this sounds very manipulative. And when, of course, I got these certifications in personality disorders, I realized, yep, that's what borderlines do. That's what narcissists do.
Right.
But I felt very kind of alone in this field, because what I realized is tons of clinicians. I'm in the Boston area, one of the most educated places in the world, really.
Right.
I got
Yeah.
trainings at, Harvard. I got trainings through um, Tufts, and I've worked at the psychiatric hospitals for the past 12 years. I've got
Right.
pages of trainings, but I never got trained. None of us did, and I could speak for all
Right.
my clinicians too, in how to deal with PDs. We
Right.
were all taught basically substance abuse and, trauma narrative, but none of us were taught how to deal with that dynamic. And then I just kind of spoke up in a TikTok video and realized, wow, to the good parents out there, you did the best you can. And that's how I just started tapping into this.
And
That's my
that's
brief story.
Yeah, and that's the video that I saw, and I was like, "Wow, that's he's speaking to people that need to hear this,
Mm,
especially, as you had mentioned, these parents." And we're not talking, put it right
mm.
out there again. We're not talking about children that or young adults or adults that were abused,
No,
truly,
no.
truly
Yeah.
abused,
Yeah,
or
that's a lot more
truly
complex. Sure. Yeah.
neglected. We're
Right.
talking about the parents that you were just mentioning, really good parents, imperfect parents, parents who made normal mistakes,
Right.
parents who went to great lengths to rectify those mistakes, whether they apologize and then apologize again, or what have you. Parents that attempt to go to some sort of counseling with the child or whatnot, whatever it is, and these parents are sitting there, and case upon case, people upon people that broach me, um, they don't know what happened. They truly don't know what they have, and they never anticipated this. And
Right.
so now they're sitting here. They thought they had a wonderful family. They thought the future looked rosy. That everyone would march forward together, and they would be the grandparents. And now they're sitting there with this deep seated pain underscored by a lack of understanding, and that pain. You try to describe it, and you have to feel it to understand that type of pain, because that is such
Mm,
a when you raise a child from early stages to grown adulthood, and they reject you and they turn their back on you. it's
mm,
it's it's like it's depth of pain that is devastating, has driven many parents to consider suicide. Many parents, I think, more than people even let on. It's a problem. And I think
mm,
one of the things of the problem is the cluster B personality disorders being
mm,
attributed to something that they did. And you know you put it out there, you say it's not trauma derived, it's not, there's much
mhm,
more to it. So explain for us the
mm,
difference you see in an adult child, or an adult, let's call it an adult, that is actually has been abused, that walks in your office, versus, let's say, an adult that hasn't, but is on this bullet train of, everybody's been abused. We've all been abused. When yet the
mhm.
parents, I don't know where you're seeing that, because, explain that first, and then we'll go dive into the cluster B personality
Sure.
disorder, the
Well,
impact.
and this helps because I just met with somebody last night that was borderline to a T, and I'm like, that's just like it's fresh on my memory. So a
Okay.
typical borderline, if they're coming in your office, they'll say something like this. My I'm just giving you an example. My dad did these terrible things to me, and I, raped and abused and whatnot, but he's my hero and I have a relationship with him. But my mom, she's always kind of trying to control me. And so that's a good example. I'm like, wait, okay, so you're telling me that you have this relationship with the villain, but this person over here that trying to help you, you're villainizing her. I mean, that's just kind of like typical BPD. So she can be victim or she could be persecutor, victim and then persecutor. And it's almost like there's a plan going on. And that's
Right.
that's why, was this person abused? Yeah, you could probably find some abuse. But what I've realized with my borderlines, my narcissists, my cluster Bs, is like every time I would go back to the past, even if there was some truth, it was highly it's highly revisionist. I never really talked to the family. And when I did talk to the family, I would get very different reports. And the second thing is, like, it was never helpful. Now, the other type of client, with the first one that you had mentioned, and I'm thinking of somebody in mind right now, they're throwing out abuse, but they don't even recognize that it's abuse. And that was like one of my videos. I was like, do you want to know how I know most of you are not even traumatized, have not been, because you talk about it all the time. The clients that are actually have been abused, their Broca's area is shut down. In other words, I had a client once that's like, yeah, when my dad, I mean, he would put a lighter under my skin, and it was just, and then she would just keep going. I'm like, wait, what did you just say? And she was like, wait, when I was telling you about work? No, no, a few seconds ago about lighter under skin. Oh yeah, that's just what he did. Well, hold up. Can we talk about that? So a lot of my actual abused clients don't even realize it. And so I have to really slow them down. There's no game that's being played.
Right.
It's like they have coped so much and managed so much in their lives.
Right.
Um, I just met with somebody earlier. I'm pretty sure that he's being, I mean, yeah, so there's verbal abuse and psychological abuse. And there's a lot of laughter to kind of deal with it. And then I have to slow it down. I'm noticing that you're laughing when you're bringing up what I would consider verbal abuse.
Right.
So there's almost like this dissociation that happens. And Bessel van der Kolk in the body keeps the score. That's actually his main point. Your body is kind of keeping the score of the trauma. It's very difficult for you to kind of address it or even talk about it. That was maybe even my story too for a number of years, because I had some real trauma, and it wasn't until like a therapist said, well, okay, can we uncover this? And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was trauma. So I think that's the main difference. Like over here, the cluster B it is part of their game and you could feel it. It's like you kind of know you're being played, but you don't want to because it sounds invalidating.
Right.
It's you know, it sound whereas over here, you're kind of in the position often where you're like, Johnny, can you go back to what you just said? So I would say that's the main difference.
Okay.
Hmm.
So explain with regards to the cluster B personality disorders.
Hmm.
Explain where they come from. Like explain, since they're not coming from trauma, they're not coming from, something that happened in the home per se. Where
Yeah.
they, and obviously, are they aggravated by what happens in the home or whatever the environment is, or um, explain that.
Yeah, no, and this is really coming from McLean Hospital, the Gunderson Institute, or Greg Lester at Pesci, just so people know I'm not just making this stuff up. I mean, I even said this before. I'm like, at the end of the day, I don't care. Like, if it came from trauma, it came from trauma. If it didn't, it didn't. But what they've realized, this is what Gunderson realized, John Gunderson, who is dead now, but he was the kind of the founder of Borderlines. I mean, not founder, but he was the first one to really treat him. It it was biopsychosocial. It seemed like it's genetic. In other words, he would realize a lot of these borderlines who lived in very safe homes manifested the same type of behaviors as the borderlines that didn't were not raised in safe homes. Same kind of patterns. So he realized that the the environment kind of matters, but it's not ultimately what matters. It's part of the human brain. So
Mhm.
the first thing you have to understand about a disorder is very different from like a what you would call like major depressive diagnosis. A diagnosis is something that you quote catch. Like if I have adjustment diagnosis or adjustment disorder, it's built on the premise that things have been pretty good in my life, and then all of a sudden tragedy hits. Or
Right.
major depressive disorder, things are pretty good, and all of a sudden I just have these suicidal ideations and I want to end my life based on certain precipitating factors. A personality disorder, you would talk to these parents and it was very different. It was like, Johnny has always been that way since he was out. Betsy has always been that way. Even when she was 3 or 4, I remember her kind of pitting things against her sister.
Right.
Whereas, like normal kids who may have had abuse, or excuse me, addiction or bipolar, which is not a personality disorder, even though it looks that
Right.
way,
Right.
depression, the parents would say, yeah, Billy was great until high school, and then he just became crazy. Well, that's not personality disorder. That's something radically different. The disorder is something that seems to have been like built in to the person's DNA. And one of the things that Gunderson noticed is that they don't have this thing called reticular fraction. I think no, reticular. I forget. Yeah, it's the part of the human brain that's basically the observing ego.
Okay.
And so they would do things, but they didn't have the conscience that the way they would come across is really problematic in their relationship dynamics. So a
Right.
narcissist, they would often use an excessive trait of grandiosity in every single situation.
Right.
So it's like that's why they're very, very good at being CEOs of companies, but they make terrible husbands or terrible wives. It's like it doesn't transfer really
Right.
well, right?
You can
You know,
understand that.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, so they don't have the observing ego to say, okay, let's shut that off. I had a histrionic client once, which histrionic, the excessive trait is going to be attention seeking, and the
Right.
deficient trait is shame. So histrionics actually don't feel shame, and which
Hmm.
is not good, because you and I kind of want to feel a little bit of shame from time to time if we do something inappropriate.
Right.
Histrionics never feel that way. And so I hope I'm answering. Yeah. So it seems that what they've realized, it seems to be something that is ingrained in their genetic makeup, had nothing to do with all these like environments that they were in. And that's the best answer.
I think it's a
Yeah.
great answer. And I think it also goes in line with, what lately is being understood is that your parents, greatest amount of influence happens up to age 7.
Yeah.
And then after
And
that, it declines. And by the
Mm.
time they're 15, it's all about, the environment, peer, whatnot. They really have near no impact on,
Mhm.
on how these kids, the decisions they make that develop over that time. So when you
Yeah.
and so that's genetics. They come in with like 400 and somewhat set characteristics that never
Mhm.
gets talked about, when it comes to this kind of stuff. Because if you're coming in with 400 characteristics, and it doesn't necessarily have to come from mom and dad, and come from great grandpa Harry, well, who the heck knew what great grandpa Harry was carrying? But now it's coming out in your kid, and you're feeling bad because you think you did something to them when it's really just that bad gene, that just, or that
Yeah.
one gene, or that one. And so, parents are sitting there and they're saying, wow, okay, I feel bad. I obviously did something, because throughout history, parents have bore the burden of, well, if something's wrong with your child, or you're an
Yeah.
adult child, if you don't have a relation with you did something. And that's what's caused, I think, this
Yeah.
explosion, that silence, of, wait a minute, how many people, how many parents are, struggling under the weight of this, and, and the weight of estrangement now, and they haven't been allowed
Mhm.
to talk about it, or because there's such shame associated with it, and such self-blame
Mm.
too, until
Mhm.
that conversation got lit. And then everybody came out of the woodwork and said, yeah, but this is happening to me. And, before, and that's where I ended up, being in this. I lit a conversation and it just exploded. And,
Wow.
but it needed to explode.
Mhm.
And it needs to be talked about, um,
Mhm.
because this is real life. And,
Yeah.
and this is going to not only impact our generation, but it's going to impact multiple generations down the line. It's what is Dr. Carl Pilmer said, if you estrange from your parents, anticipate that's going to impact 7 generations out. 7 generations is a lot of time. A lot of
1,000%. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up some really good points, and I don't, I would like to see psychoeducation on tactics that work. I mean, I am trying to be as careful as I can in my videos on personality disorders, because I actually really like working with this group. I want to get even further certifications even this year. I want to get like several more. I want to write a book on it. I love working with borderlines who are wanting help. Those are my favorite clients to work with.
yeah,
Narcissists are actually the most treatable of all of them. I'm getting certified at McLean Hospital next week in this thing called mentalization, which is the only treatment modality that works for them. In other words, it gives them the observing ego that I was talking about. If you
wow,
have a child that has antisocial, yeah, that's not treatable. And it's manageable, but it's not treatable.
right,
So I have a lot of parents who are like, "Oh, Johnny just wants therapy." Well, if he's an antisocial, we're gonna have to talk about very, very different things.
right,
What it does is that it really alleviates the guilt. It alleviates the pressure. It also redirects the field to work on presence and like, rather than this revisionist history on blame shifting. Because one of the things that a narcissist does a lot better than you and I do, they will always beat you at your own game of victimization. Same thing with a borderline. Try going in the ring with a borderline and try playing her game on victim versus persecutor. She will wipe the floor with you. And these
right,
parents are exhausted. They don't know what to do. So what I often teach parents is to stay out of the drama triangle, persecutor, rescue, victim. Once you kind of see it, there's a huge boundary that just comes up internally that you feel a lot better. I'm a lot better. I'm a lot happier than ever before dealing with this population group. I just kind of stay away from it while it just kind of whirls its wind. And I
right,
teach parents the great and statement. The borderline daughter wants you to live in the binary world of black and white. You're either for me or you're against me. I want you to stay out of the drama triangle, simplicity, clarity, and live in the and. I was a good parent, and yes, I lost my temper. I want you to say that to her. She wants to say, no, you lost your temper that one time, Dad, and you're abusive. That's a binary. I want you to live in the and statement, stay out of her tornado. And what he would often do is he would try to justify, no, I wasn't. You're totally. And she would wipe the floor with him.
Yeah.
And he was exhausted. And then he would make an apology that he really didn't need to make because he actually wasn't in the wrong. But then she was demanding it and she was manipulative. But here's the
Yeah.
thing that a lot of people don't realize this. All of my borderlines and narcissists they actually don't trust people that play their game. I don't play their game, and that's why they keep coming back. And
Right.
that's what's really kind of interesting because I kind of know what they're doing, but I'm not emotionally inside it. And so if we could teach parents and even healthcare workers, because I actually think a lot of these healthcare workers are buying into this crap and they're telling their kids to cut off when they haven't heard the other story. They have no training in this and they feel justified by telling this poor 23-year-old girl who they think is like the dad was somehow molesting her when really it was not. That actually didn't happen.
Right.
But because of Me Too and because of the way therapy has become highly politicized and
Yeah.
very rooted in identity politics, the therapist feels this kind of pressure to 1,000% validate this borderline. And now she feels, yes, I should push her to cut off. And what ends up happening is that that borderline, who, by the way, has the highest suicide rate out of all the PDs, now
Right.
you've just cut off her, kind of what I said over there, the story, her root. And then she's going to give that same drama to people that don't even really care about her. And
Right.
then what? Then how do you follow through with her? So it's a real mess right now. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't know what the hell they're doing. Excuse my French, but it's just like, and I'm realizing that. And
I
wanted to clean
I
this
mean, you
up.
see it on, yeah, you see it on TikTok. You see it on
Oh
TikTok
yeah,
with, you see it on
it's awful.
Instagram with a lot of the therapists. I don't ever. I'm with you. At the end of the day, what I'm hoping in what I'm doing and
Mm,
the work that you're doing, whatnot, is that the understanding comes in and we can fix this to a degree that it's able to be, we can fix the family. I think this has been made out to be a I punch you, you punch me on social media a lot of times for the what's the word, drama, and the of it all, when I really think that what we should be doing is saying, okay, how do we get it together? How do we get the family back together? That's the point of all of this, right? It's not I don't
mm,
win, you don't win. We either both lose or we both lose if we don't continue, if we keep continue down this path. But I do think there are, and I don't want to ever say that all these therapists out there are bad. That's absolutely not the truth. That
no,
is
no,
not
no.
the truth. There are some amazing, you among them, but there are some amazing mental health professionals. And then there are a lot of mental health professionals that are, as I believe what you said, they just don't know what they're dealing with. The
Mm,
problem with their situation, though, is they gain power quickly,
mhm,
through by feeding the narrative, or feeding the, and then what happens is they boldly go into areas that only help to damage things more. And maybe it's, that it could come very well by thinking that they're doing the right thing when they just don't know what they're doing, and they're
yeah.
causing so much damage. And let's talk about it. I mean, I do have to say this. There's a huge amount of money being made on this estrangement, and on
Oh yeah,
this
1,000%.
huge. And I'm
Yeah.
really always suspect when you see like $1,000 courses, and or beyond, like, and conferences that are just like through the roof, and you're playing on people's, you're really really playing on people's
Mm,
trauma, their people's suffering. And everybody's got to make money, but I think there's a reasonable amount to be made, and then there's people that are just taking advantage of it and just clicking, and I hate
mm,
to see that.
yeah,
I absolutely hate to see that,
yeah.
because it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And then, I mean, you do get some therapists that are really, they're just, I'm going to say, I've seen therapists on as TikTok that are really just being actively destructive,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
should not
Highly.
be practicing
No.
overall, than get a large social media following,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So So,
Hmm.
I'm seeing that too. But, the thing is, I like what you said about the but and the and. I was going to ask you about that
Hmm. Hmm.
because I agree. I really think that the and gets left out of the equation,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to good parents. That, yes, I did this, but I was also a good parent, or yes, making an easy solution thing. You wanted skis, I bought you a pony, and I gave the skis to your brother. That's true. But I was hoping that, I thought that, Anna was a good person for buying you a pony. you
Yeah,
know,
right, right.
you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
sure, sure.
So,
Yeah.
how much of this do you think is also caused by social media, loneliness, and the age of ease?
Yeah, I saw a shift. That's a great question. I was thinking about this. I think, how did the shift happen? I think the shift, and this might be controversial, I'm going to say it anyway. It really happened with George Floyd, not COVID. Because what George Floyd did, it put identity politics in the very, very premise of every single institution. And I mean schools, social media, Hollywood, everywhere.
Yeah.
You're either a racist or you're not, or you're an anti-racist.
Mhm.
I should start there because that's where I used to trust all the therapists, even like I'm on a floor of therapists, and I may trust two. Don't tell anybody, why you're on this floor. I used to have dinner with these people. I used to love meeting with these therapists. Now, a guy just asked me the other day, I need family therapy. And I said, sorry, man, I don't know who to trust. I hate saying that, but George Floyd, there was something about George Floyd, that whole thing that made everything about identity politics.
Yeah.
It's either you believe all women or you're a sexist. You're
Right.
either for the transing of kids or you're a transphobe.
Right.
You're either a Nazi or you're anti-Trump.
Right.
Or you get what I'm saying. It's just kind of
Right.
like the whole world became a binary on that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And now what's going on with almost all of the social work, and I know this because I know what they're teaching, because I know the social workers, and these are the people I'm trying to hire, and I'm not being able to hire very many of new therapists. I mean, because I know what they're being taught. They're being taught to basically view the world in this kind of oppressor versus oppressed lens. And what that feeds, it's so funny because that's borderline right there. And that's all, it's a borderline behavior, I should say. And that feeds social media. Social media lives off of the algorithm of personality disorder types of traits. That's what Greg
Right.
Luster even said.
Right.
Narcissism, all that stuff. It just, the algorithms goes through the roof.
Right.
So now you have a very, what I would say, highly unethical therapeutic system, APA, I do not trust anymore. Even a guy, I follow a guy, and his name is Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. Love him.
Yeah.
He has really criticized the APA in the past several years. Same thing with Steven Pinker, who's a
Okay.
linguist. Yeah, over there at Harvard. Very, very critical because he's very critical of the sense that we've allowed politics and division inside institutions that should be trustworthy. And now we're making money, but it's no longer about ethics. Ethics does not sell. Exaggeration sells, but
Yeah.
ethics doesn't sell. And so, to answer your question, I think that's therapists are now feeding off that, thinking that what they're doing is a noble cause, but we've lost, a lot of the what makes a good therapist. Number one, a good therapist would never even tell anybody to cut off anybody. When somebody says to me that they're even being verbally berated by their wife or by their husband, I don't tell them to divorce because I was taught in grad school way back in 2009 that's unethical because as a therapist, if you were coming to me and say, Peter, I'm thinking of divorcing my husband, I wouldn't tell you you should, or I wouldn't tell you you shouldn't. Even if he
Right.
was berating you, the minute I say to you, well, I think you should, I've just become from therapist to now I become the perpetrator, and you look to me to as a dependent source of, um, you know, of information. That's not the job of a therapist. The job of a therapist is to put it back on you and let you make your own decisions. So we've really lost our way. We've lost our vision. We've lost our sense of direction through all this mess. Um, it's really sad because, and I think a lot of people who get into therapy, they're highly empathetic people. And so I think there's a naive reason and malicious reason what goes on here. I think the naive reason is like they just really want to support their client and they think trauma probably has something to do with it. And I get that. I've been there too. But you have, I don't mind naming her because I think our, codependency Kate comes to mind. Very, very, very toxic. I'm like, how are you even ethically licensed? She is one of the most unethical people I think I've ever. I mean, my jaw dropped at the stuff that she was
Yeah.
saying. She breaks every single ethical code in the book, and she's got 285,000 followers. She's doing well, and yet highly unethical. And like it's just like I would never tell my client to do that. That's basic ethics 101. And I think she's doing it for a very malicious reason.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about this, and I get
Yeah.
it because then I have a lifelong client, and now you're
Right.
dependent. And I
Yeah.
hope I answered your question. I don't want to go
Well,
any.
you brought up so much. So, it's also power. There are a couple of them. Like I said, she was one that I was thinking of when I was telling you on these platforms.
Oh yeah,
They,
she knows.
there's
Yeah,
some
yeah,
really destructive. You know,
very. Yeah.
I had a run in with her, and I had a run in with another therapist, Dr. David Simonson. Doc Dave, he goes by, who actually pretended to be my son and did it so well and did not put in bold letters I'm only kidding, that people kept flooding my, now I met your son and he said all these things, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And then I saw it,
Yeah.
I'm like, he's like my age, you think he's my son? And it
Yeah.
just became
Right.
a
Right.
spiraling thing. It was just so crazy that the lines he crossed were unbelievable a few times. You know what,
Hmm.
so I agree. That's when I go back and say some of these therapists are really damaging, but there are a lot of them that are good. And when you
100%.
say
Yep.
about the whole thing about George Floyd, it's interesting because I just wrote a piece. I just wrote a piece because I'm a journalist too, right? So I just wrote a
Oh,
piece.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was talking about what you were just saying, and it was talking about how this country was founded on unity.
Hmm.
Country was founded in unity, and the reality is it was unity because it was we everyone came to it with the differences. We had differences, right? We were all different.
Yeah.
We were coming to everything different, coming to, and so you need unity. Unity needs differences to exist. All right, so otherwise what you have is sameness. All right,
Hmm.
everybody's got to be the same. All right, so when you come to let's say a country and you come in with differences, whether it be the left, the right, religious difference, what have you, all right,
Hmm.
you take those differences, you keep those differences, and you build a framework that um, allows for these differences, but a framework that works even with those differences inside, because that and you, a framework that provides the unity, and you move
Hmm.
forward together for a reason, a unified reason. When we started this country, it was we wanted a new country, so we had to take those differences and we had to say, okay, we can allow for them, we can work with them. The goal is to have this unified country, and then
Hmm.
you work to create that, right? You didn't say get
Yeah.
rid of the difference or you need to
Hmm.
become me. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and now I see it from the George Floyd. I agree with you.
Hmm.
Sameness. Sameness is getting pushed. If you don't believe the same thing as me, I can't sit at the dinner table with you. If you don't believe the same thing as me, whether you're whatever your believer, then I can't really talk to you. If you don't believe the same, if you don't understand that, you're abusive because, I say you're abusive, but, and you don't agree with me, then you know what? I can't go on with you.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Or
1,000%.
you know, if I don't say, if you don't apologize when I tell you you need to apologize because I'm saying you did this wrong, and you're saying, yeah, but I didn't say that. Certainly didn't mean it, and I don't agree that that's what you're telling me. That's exactly what I said and I meant. No, you know, then I can't have a relationship. You know, so this is going on all over the place.
100%. Yeah.
It's going on across the board in
Mm,
every aspect, and there are no good examples of unity in this country or in many cases around the world right now because we're exploding. So the
yeah.
reality is, if you give that to people, that's a trickle down effect, right? So you go from the top
Yeah.
down. If you don't have any good examples, then you adopt that, you know, that thinking, right? And if you're getting condoned, you're saying, okay, you know, good for you, you're doing this, which is what's happening a lot of the time.
Mm, hmm.
um what do you have? You have people pushing against each other, you know,
Yeah.
and you have
Yeah.
parents pushing against kids, kids pushing against parents. And then on top
Mm,
of it, you have this new dynamic where, you know, parents are no longer the major influence in children's lives. All right. Where it used to be that they were, because we grew up in a community, we grew up in a family, we grew up with grandparents that were involved, and you know, they basically almost lived with us or did live with us. And then you have now society that wants that power too. You got the environment, the peer, and you know, they can't exist equal. One has to give to the other. So right
mm,
now, the
mm.
external world is taking over, and parents are feeling, you know, the parents are their influence is so much less, yet they're getting all the blame.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
many cases.
100%. No, I like that. Yeah. Why do you?
You
Yeah. No. I mean, that's a good. I mean, that's a good question. I'd love to ask you. And why do you think that even occurs? So I mean, from your perspective too.
uh, I really think it is one, the larger influence, the larger environment
Mm,
that
hmm.
technology has provided,
Mm,
right? So I think that's one thing, because their world now is a much bigger world than you and I when we were growing up, right? So when we were
mm,
growing up, our world what basically consisted of, um, you know, school, the people in school, you know what have you, our peer group and whatnot. Now their peer group, their world,
mm.
it is the world, right?
Yeah.
And I also think they never turn off. All right, so I don't think they even they have the ability to even know themselves because they never turn off. They never go quiet. It's really uncomfortable for them to go quiet. All right,
Hmm.
and in that, so they're lost because they never give them really themselves time to get to know themselves. And
Yeah.
that, I'm going to bring in another aspect of that,
Mm,
faith. You know, the loss of faith in this country too has added to that because
yeah.
you've taken that structure away from the family, away from the foundation.
Mm,
You also having they would don't have any space to even get to know God. That's been ripped and said, you know, that's a fallacy. So you don't have that anymore to anchor. But a lot of the foundation of what we grew up with, and I'm not saying it's been torn away,
mm.
and where it's now, you know, you don't need to be loyal. It is about you. And part of this is the gentle parenting movement. Part of it is, you know, that, you know, you're the peer, right? So you're the
Yeah.
peer. So I think a lot of it all goes back to, you know, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff where, I think my dog just went out there. Guys, guys, stop. What is there, a deer?
That's all right. Yeah, it's part of life. You're describing as you're describing this, like life is happening all around you.
Life
Yeah.
is happening. And
Yeah.
so it's one of those things where I'm going to have to stop them. Peter, give me a second.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Hey, guys, 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 stop.
I have one dog. So
Are you- okay.
I
So
have a
we're
dog. I have a dog myself. I know exactly how that's like.
four.
Yeah.
You never want to come to my house. They'll rip you apart.
Yeah. Right. Mine is a terrible guard dog. So she's adorable. She'll just like lick you to death. So yeah. No,
Oh my God.
I like where you're going there.
You
So
know,
yeah.
but it's really so true. So you're, you know, you're putting a lot upon the old way, blaming
Hmm.
a lot of the old way, when so much of the dynamic has changed in such a large way
Hmm.
that it's conflicting. And I
Yeah.
think, these kids are truly, they're buckled into easy. We've given them,
Hmm.
and I often see this too, they're buckled into easy, so they almost don't want to do the work to help themselves, is one, because that's hard. Like you said, it
Yeah.
takes courage. All right. And they're listening to their peers, and they're getting validation from that too. And they're even growing fan bases on that. So that sort of locks them in, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's happening too. But I also think there's a problem in our society today, and that people fail to like even recognize. And that is that 10-year additional gap we've gained, that given these young adults, to remain in the child mindset. And what I mean is, when you
Hmm.
and I turned 18, we had to make a choice. You worked, you went to college, or that was it. You worked, you went to college, you did something. You wanted to get out of your parents' house,
Hmm.
and you wanted to start your life. You wanted to, do something. And it was almost an embarrassment when you didn't do something and you were
Hmm.
still home with your, well,
Yeah.
but then now you have a situation where you added in a 10-year span called emerging adulthood. And what is, I think, how this has been interpreted, emerging adulthood has been interpreted, is it's an extra 10 years that you can just play around with. And I really think at this point, kids are sort of looking at this, they almost got a break.
Hmm.
And still
Hmm.
being child, like in many ways, a childlike mind, a childlike, situation where, they expect parents to, to continue to care for them, continue to carry the load, continue to pay certain things,
Yeah.
continue. And then they're at 30, and now they're ready to start their life. Well,
Yeah.
parents are like, I mean, generationally, we were like, yeah, but when we were 18, we're up and out, and they are like, what is going on with you? You really do need to
Hmm.
to to, and I think that has something to do with
Hmm.
it, and I think it's valid that you just
Yeah.
like, when you're shoved and you said, look, you need to grow up, you need to get out there. You had that pressure on you. You grew up and got out there, and I
Right.
think that's part of this whole thing, because I they're not. I think it actually adds to this whole, because you're seeing these adult kids on, these various social media platforms kicking back. They're like in their 26, 27, and they're
Hmm.
still, leaving
Yeah.
these terrible comments on. If anyone that has got anything going on that isn't working towards saving this or solving this, if they've got something, they're not going to be on social media like, being vicious towards people. They've got things that they're doing, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's a big, I think that's part of it. I think it's all part of it. And I think
Hmm.
it really is only gonna get worse if, we don't get into control of it, especially with social media. I think we're just seeing the beginning of it, honestly. If
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. No, well, it's hard to tell where we're going to go with that. I mean, it is. I mean, or the cause of it. I mean, um, I'm still playing around with whether or not, like, if this is, there has been a lot of like the coddling of the American mind that has occurred, as Jonathan Haidt likes to say. Coddling is really kind of an interesting style too, because when you coddle your kids, you take them away from risk, and that prevents them from improvising the real world.
Right.
There is one of the biggest, I would say, mistakes that we as parents, I can speak for myself here too, I'm just as guilty of it, is the cult of safetyism,
Okay.
and my job as a parent, I'm parent three kids, is not to keep my kids safe.
Right.
It's to prepare them for the real world that has a significant amount of risks.
Right.
And so that's something that has to change. I also, another influence of mine that has been very predominant in my thinking is a guy named Ian McGilchrist, and he wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary. And I'm simultaneously, well, right now I'm reading a book called Against the Machine, and that talks about how Western society has really been dominated by this kind of mechanicistic, just well, I should say bureaucratic mode of thinking. And now you're seeing that with AI.
Right.
And McGilchrist's main point in his book, Master and His Emissary, is that we have two parts of our brains, the left and the right. The right, though, actually sees the whole picture and context, relationships, meaning, embodiment. The left, that handles abstraction or categories, tools, manipulation. And what his McGilchrist's premise is that we live in a very, and you can tell this by our culture, very much in a left brain dominant um, mode of
Yeah.
attention. You
Right.
have two brains that pay attention differently.
Right.
And you could even see this with artwork. If you go back to the Renaissance or you go back to Romantic painting,
Right.
you walk inside, even if you're an atheist, which I'm
Right.
not, but like one point I actually was, and I went to the St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City when I was an agnostic atheist, and I just felt like I needed to worship. And this is coming from like this 20-year-old kid, and it's vast.
Right.
That's the right brain. It
Right.
makes you it helps you see the whole picture.
Right.
Schizophrenia is a very brand new diagnosis, believe it or not.
Really?
Autism, we didn't see that until recently. And what McGilchrist's point is, that's a left brain dominant uh, shift of thinking. And
Right.
you could see it even in the artwork. Go to the Modern Art Museum. There is no vastness. It's like a giant eyeball.
Right.
It's also focused on ugly. I brought my kid to the MFA, all three of my kids, and we walked through the modern art section. And my little 8-year-old looks at me and says, Daddy, I could do a lot of this better than this person can. And I'm like, yeah, you probably can. And my other girl, who's 13, she says, Daddy, I don't like that part. It's ugly. And she's right. Um, and I don't look at that as like the artists are bad, because art is just a reflection of what our culture pays attention to.
Right.
And so we've lost the integration of the right. And I think that's why people are starting to head back. I actually, my prediction, believe it or not, I have a different prediction, because I look at it from a broad eye, view. I mean, I actually think we're going to have a more religious society in 20 years, because those are the only people that are going to be having kids.
Mm.
You have to look at who's having children, not right now, but
Right.
the people who are cutting off, what I've realized with a lot of them, they're dinks, dual income, no kids.
Right.
And what that tells me is that, okay, you're okay cutting off your mom and dad, but you're too chicken, you're too scared, you're too terrified to look into the abyss and have a child yourself, because you think that you may replicate it. So instead of reconciling with your mom and getting to know her, your dad, you would rather just cut off, be bitter, and live for yourself and just not have kids. I don't see a lot of the people that are cutting off as people that are family people. And
Mm.
if they are, I see it as like for a little while, but they break
Mm.
down, especially in teenage years.
Yeah.
Because in teenage years, those kids really rebel and they start to go against their own ego. And
Mm.
then that's when they want to reconcile maybe a little bit back to their mom and dad who they cut themselves off with. But at that point, it's too late, because
Right.
it's like at that point, gosh, now you're facing like your mom's maybe like 70 or 80,
Right.
and you've just waited that long.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of things going on. I mean, I think right now with AI and this mechanicistic, kind of, it's where abstraction is very much dominating in our culture. And so what
Right.
that means is that meaning is collapsing everywhere, and so people are longing for some type of meaning.
Right.
And that's even the problem with a lot of mental health. Mental health is disconnected with philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's a problem, because philosophy answers deeper questions than just kind of like you know, what do you feel? That doesn't mean anything if it's not connected to a greater sense of reality, or a greater dominant mode of attention.
Right.
So I think I'm also, so I'm playing around just with a lot of different themes as I get into this on like, how do we address it? Because I also think I want to move ahead. I also want these parents I've cut off. Let's try to let's prepare for that not happening, but also where can we steer our culture to a healthier, you know, view of reality, which is what I would like to do. It's just, because then that gives you hope
Yeah.
in the midst of suffering. And
I think that's
because
a great way of thinking, and I think that's a great place to leave off for our next conversation.
oh yeah, right. Okay. Right, yeah, sure.
Because you have a child to pick up, and
I do.
I mean,
Actually do.
all right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I'm going to give it
Yeah,
more thought. It's like you're talking about the pendulum swinging back almost, because it's gone one way, other way. Now it's coming back. So that's a good way of thinking of it too. We'll talk about that in the next.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good. Okay, and right there.
All right. Thank you for the work you're doing, for all your contributions, for
Oh,
speaking out
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
recognizing
absolutely.
parents. And I'm going to have you back on again. All right. And
Yeah.
we're going to go for pizza.
Okay. Yeah, let's go for pizza. Okay. Yeah, we should talk about a conference. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Um,
we really should. I would like to do
yeah,
that with you. So let's
yeah.
talk about that.
And
Okay.
next time I won't end on like a big theme at the very, very end. I'll try to be more responsible. No, appreciate that. No, thanks for having me on.
That was a
Yeah,
good
thanks for having me
weekend.
on so much.
All
Yeah.
right, Peter. I'll see you soon.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye
I'll
bye.
talk to you later.
He's great, right? All right. Yeah, we both are running around, he and I. So I know he's gotta go pick up a child, and I've gotta run into a meeting. But I'm just gonna mention two things before I leave. One, I always mention it, Doormat Mom No More. It's available on Amazon. It's doing great. And it's a really a community-based book. So if you're feeling alone, pick the book up and you realize you're not alone. And then second, we just launched the Doormat Mom No More app. If you want to meet people who are estranged, parents who are estranged in your hometown, join this app. It's free. It's free for the first 3 months. After that, it's less than $5 a month, because no parent who needs this type of support should be locked out of it because of finances. So you can look for it in the Google Play Store and the iOS Store and get it today. Tell your friends about it too. That's it. Thank you again for joining me at Doormat Mom No More. I'm Doormat Mom. Next week, we have another incredible guest, and Peter will be coming back because we have a lot more to talk about. So till then, have a great weekend. Stay warm in the snow.